actually.
Half and half.
Yeah.
It's so bright. You've got a tea.
I would like
Tea.
I think you I just. And I think you printed it and I put out some of them out.
She's got a chair somewhere. It's like a perch. Perch?
Yeah.
No, there isn't this. Oh, okay, you're not
We're going to read a few poems up here, and then we're going to read a few poems down there as well. So we start off here and do a little walk and head downstairs. So my collection, this sequence is called Lingdy Long, which is a Welsh phrase that means to dilly-dally or to wander, to amble, to trip. And the sequence as a whole looks at walking. So the first poem of the sequence is called Feet. What was it with the Victorian desire to hide the legs of furniture with drapes until the point where the leg morphs into short claws, long paws and toes that could go nowhere? As if to give something that's part wardrobe, part tiger, half a chance to walk out of this indoor zoo where nobody moved. From beneath every tablecloth at my nan's, feet would peep out. I wondered what might happen if the piano, half antelope, spoke. Would the herd get up and gallop out the door? Sideboard as deer, wing chair as horse, antimacassars and all, plant stand as gazelle, shedding their lace, their drawers and carafes, and on all fours escort my uncle to the lake where he'd set up the outdoor room he needed to feel at home enough to fish. The next poem is a little sonnet after Romeo and Juliet. Take the Juliet balcony, for example, whose name conveys romance in a garden not your own. Flushed with rose petals, you fancy hide an ivy-clad balustrade, its stone steps fluent in moss. The rear elevation of the Dorset, 3 beds, 2 baths, boasts a standard balconette called Juliet. What's in a name to make you think you'd have space to do the conga, let alone take the air with a potted plant until the candlestick's hot tears run dry? On this estate, all French doors open inwards to discourage dramatic exits. Tricked by architecture, again, you're 42 and this has got to stop. It's January. She's not a Capulet. You scaled this wall an hour ago. You need a paracetamol. So what, the front path is varnished with ice. Put your finger into the porcelain eye of the doorbell. Hold it. There. Weather forecast. She wants to go outside, bow to the rain's applause. Funny she can't stop him going outdoors when it's about to pour, in his Austrian breeches with a feather in his hat. How come they're never in at the same time? In her guts, she knows she's stuck in a plywood chalet 4 centimetres by 6 above a gas fire, that the shutters she asked him to fix last year still don't close. Given the choice, she'd go back inside. But the sun's still out and this is her role, to smile and swing through the arch with her feet neatly nailed to a plinth, the other end of which is yoked to him indoors. She'd rather be a cuckoo tied to a wire, out on the hour, every hour. Now that's a one-bird job. At least you get to open your mouth and sing. And the last poem that I'm going to read here is about walking in the Lake District, and it's called Climbing Helvellyn. 10 years from now, the path will look the same. Conceal the same old rocks lying in wait for the newest ingénues. It's us who will have changed, morphed from stags to men with mortgages, yet unsure how. escaping from a feeling we can't now name and couldn't gauge the weight of, the day we bounded up Helvellyn, camouflaged in tutus and pink antlers, bantering at the glances of those heading back to bills shouting from dressers to sheds that needed creosoting. Not for us, oh no, we had it all in the bag, vodka and galaxy bars and all the blondes of England to come. At the summit, 10 women on a checkered rug, staring at how far they'd travelled, had just begun to pass round cling-filmed sandwiches as if they were transparent presents, and point little silver flasks like wands at mountains still to climb. When we fizzed up with, "Hello girls, having a party?" "Kind of," they nodded. "We're a support group. We're widowed, under 40.
What this place is. Since you are wondering, I'll begin with what it isn't. A museum. Quaint, where artefacts are laid out of context for fingers to poke into a past lost in rumour and soot-filled shadows, where we stare wide-eyed at such monstrous presses and wonder. A tourist attraction. This is no theme park with roll-up, have-a-go prompts to print your name in a choice of fonts, where seasonal students with sepia souls dress in synthetic, authentic clothes and smile through perfect teeth. An institution, neither where the air is heavy with church hush, nor where school days lengthen into the best of our lives, nor where thankless tasks serve the town's civic duty. Nothing like that. We stand in a place of work, business, where a living is well earned by a jobbing printer, a place of bread and butter, where art and industry breathe together, where presses, print, traditional ink are the blood that pumps through the body of these walls, where time has not stopped but circulates, with the news of every birth and marriage proclaimed in a joyous print run. Minimum 100 postcard size, ready in a fortnight, all right. And beats in sorrow at death, every death's obituary, its painful, sweet, sour eulogy for life's shortness, however long. The printer weeps laying out these words, as the printer always has. I'd love to say, in the old cliché, if only this place could speak. But it does. Every day. Here, the work sings for itself, for its supper. Now you see these drawers. They're not drawers. They're cases. Shallow trays of square spaces, paired to hold a complete typeface of majuscule and minuscule. The compositor withdraws a brace and sits them, one high, one low, on the composing frame, for each case placed where it always was, for practicality, for ease of use. Capital letters in the upper case, little letters in the lower. Have you heard of the Dove's press? The Dove's typeface, rather. The Dove's typeface was a beautiful typeface that was destroyed by its owner. This is extracts from the diary of Mr. Cobden Sanderson, printer and bookbinder, August 1916 to January 1917. True story. On those nights when I drown the doves, I do it with sadness and a quiet flapping in my heart, but no regrets. On those nights when they fall in one fell swoop, when they settle on the silt of the Thames and their weight pulls them down to the bedrock, my grief is numbed by relief that now my exquisite type can never be set in a mechanised press. It was crafted to be pressed by the hand and arm of a man, not an industrialised automaton. This is my legacy. Silent and scattered like wild bird seed, my doves will feed on its sacrifice, live its own legend. On those nights when I drown the doves, I pray for devil dark, a hungry tide, an impossible resurrection. This is also a true story. Thank you. This is a true story about a poor chap in Budapest who was 17 at the time. The printer's apprentice. On second thoughts, he wished he'd swallowed his words, left them stirring in his belly until they were kinder or dissolved to silence. When she left him bereft of sense, he mourned her absence and spoke aloud her beautiful name, to hear it again and again, then set its letters in the prettiest type and swallowed them. Her beautiful name now dissolved to silence.
Make your way down to the lower room. Lesley and I are going to read a couple of poems from the top of the steps.
Do you all know Martin Clark, the printer? He's might be around.
He's just there.
He's just there. There he is. Yes. Now, I always call him a printer, but he's a compositor. But I can't get compositor into the poems because they wouldn't scan. So I'm sorry. But Martin sort of lives his life upside down and back to front in his work. This is, but I call him Martin Tilley. I call him Martin Tilley. His name is Martin Clark. Martin Tilley was the boy who broke my teenage heart. Better broken young, though, when scarring leaves little trace, than widowhood at 35, when every tear would have scratched my face, engraven, graven to the grave. This is a poem about a river, the river that you see in text sometimes. Sometimes when you see a piece of justified text, there's a little gap that kind of creates a pattern through the middle of it, like a gap, which is called a river. Underneath the page's skin, the paper remembers its heart, shuddering with every fibre at the angularity of its new leaf. It remembers how its old leaves breathed, how they tore as its tree was hewn down, how its bark shattered on the duff and the birds screeched in a dust-choked panic, how shocked the after silence. And in that hush, how the river's pulse reached out through the ground to soothe its shaking sap. It remembers the blue ink of the river and how its roots had run to the river, pushing the earth, reaching for the river, and how the river gave itself freely. It remembers the violence of storms, the black ink nights, the raw winters when all it had was the river to give succour as the wind ripped its leaves in brittle, desiccated deaths. Weighing on the page's skin, the watermark gently scars. The paper draws its thirst. Tattooed letters from any case line up militarily, pointing their serifs for reading eyes to track along horizontally, decoding meanings from the blocked and justified marks, seeing only regularity. A river's pulse reaches out, spreads letters like gravel, and untamed streams of breathing space force the natural order of an ordered symbiosis. Tree, river, paper, page, river.
Thank you, Lesley. So I'm going to read a couple of poems. This one is called On the Road, and it's actually about the life of Madame Tussaud, who spent a lot of time travelling around with her exhibits before she finally settled in Baker Street. The thing you'd think she would have been good at was sitting still. But Madame Tussaud spent 36 years touring the country with a horse-drawn cart, packed with wax effigies of the nearly dead, the long dead, and those whose heads were freshly off the block. Hers was both travelling newspaper and a show whose cast stayed motionless at all her gigs. Alone, but for her set of replicas jolting at every pothole, she'd take each face between her hands and kiss it sweet good-night, in Leicester, Sheffield, Inverness, give talks on wax, the facts, don't model outside. For those who'd fallen out of favour, she'd chisel off their heads. In Marylebone Road, right now, people are standing in lines to pay to file past people standing in lines who've been dead for years, but made to look alive. To make the dead appear living, the living dead, without quite meaning to, is a skill I cannot yet take in, and one that started life in death masks where she'd reanimate the guillotined. Before you go, did you know Madame herself was shipwrecked once off the west of Ireland, and all her wax companions dived wide-eyed to the seabed, only to pop to the surface one by one when the vessel rotted away, and startled the fish, who thought this lot already dead? So I'm just going to read two more. This one is called Losing It, and it's about losing things and finding them again. And it's also about fishing and dementia, which two subjects apparently don't go together, but in fact they do. It comes to something when you're so afraid of mislaying your possessions, you find yourself roping your bed to the floor with a running bowline, and every chair in the room is knotted to a wall with a sheet bend, and you can no longer open your wardrobe door because you've spliced it to the curtains with a round turn and two half hitches. There must be a storm coming in, Dad, now that everything in your flat is lashed down. You are, as you tell me, at sea, and I agree. After years twisting nets in fishing ports, you've plaited all the lanyards of your life together here in the secure unit at Wootton Lawn. At last, you're tied down, have nothing left to lose, except your mind, to which I'm so attached I keep coming back to hear you list all the things you've lost and whatever else you've forgotten to recall, including the common ground we've found in making lists as we slip between unfinished sentences, pass each other spare words. And the final poem that I'm going to read from this little collection is a grammar poem. It sounds incredibly boring as I say it, but it kind of hots up about halfway through. It's just to sort of keep you on your well, you're already on your toes, but it's called Conditionals. The first conditional is neutral, simple present, tells you the facts. The second is for planning and for dreams, simple past only, please. The third is for regrets or strong advice, and always in the pluperfect tense for describing hypothetical actions or explanations, recriminations, such as, if only you had tried harder, we might have got together. You use school as an excuse, I concluded. Had I been shrewd, I might have worked it out. You are devoting yourself to cancer of the throat, and by this time next year would no longer be able to speak, let alone teach Greek, or even sit in the olive groves again, where on Tuesday at 11 you've asked to be buried in full sun, or would have if you hadn't had your tongue cut out. So I'm going to hand over to Lesley in the corner now.
This is called the Otley Run. Pressed into a Saturday night, an invitation, and eye-opening. Students drag themselves from pub to pub as Laura Croft or Mario, colluding troops of fancy-dressed childhood heroes. They reach for irony, pretend to have put away childish things. Batman, a short ball of a woman, celebrates her 50 years in a pub with karaoke and Robin, yellow caper flashing, squeals as they spin on their heels with more northern soul than I ever had at 16. There's a ghost in my house, I can't hide, we all sing. My childhood ghost stirs. I couldn't keep the faith. I couldn't find it among the stay-pressed, robed, back-flipping all-nighters in this, the always foreign land that I wake up from, clammy, panting, knowing I'm still running from its bounds, chased by the ghost of that glottal stop space sound that everyone hears but can never spell. And my childhood ghost stirs me to turn on my heels and leave.
Very good.
So we're going to end with a poem about a printing press, an Antarctic printing press, that went out with Shackleton's expedition 1914-1916. Before I read it, I'd like to say a big thank you to Martin for hosting us. Thank you very much. Printing press. Each letter is curled in a separate bed of the typecase, like a cutaway of the ship's cabins in miniature. Every swirl of the alphabet carved for its own Rome. We all hold two jobs. Wilson is doctor and taxidermist who's obsessed his sketches won't reflect the true hues of Antarctica after a winter in artificial light. With Shackleton, sub-lieutenant and editor of the South Polar Times, he turns out the playbills and results of football matches on the flow in letterpress, binds the paper in Venesta plywood from packing cases. As they can't obliterate the stencil titles of the original contents, each volume is by default called The Julienne Soup, The Bottled Fruit, and The Irish Stew.